Revered and respected by our ancestors for thousands of years, demonized and suppressed by the war on drugs, and now at the dawn of a new millennia, they are making their triumphant return. Scientists, researchers, and patients alike are exploring these ancient therapies to heal modern ailments. And we're here to bring you the latest in scientific research, cutting-edge practices, and first-hand experiences from those who have been transformed in body, mind, and spirit by plant medicines from cannabis to psilocybin to ayahuasca and beyond. This is the Plant Medicine Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the next episode of the Plant Medicine Podcast. I'm Dr. Lynn Marie Morsky, your guide on this journey. And today we have our second of 3 episodes with the incomparable Dr. Julie Holland. And today we are talking about antidepressants, namely both how they affect the impact that certain psychedelics can have on our neurochemistry, as well as some strategies for tapering off antidepressants should you choose to do so. Now, if you're not familiar yet with Dr. Holland, Dr. Julie Holland is a psychiatrist specializing in psychopharmacology with a private practice in New York City. Her book, Weekends at Bellevue, chronicles her 9 years running the psychiatric emergency room as an attending physician on the faculty of NYU School of Medicine. Frequently featured on the Today Show and CNN's documentary series, Weed, Holland is the editor of The Pot Book and Ecstasy, The Complete Guide. Both books are nonprofit projects that help to fund clinical therapeutic research. Dr. Holland is a medical monitor for several MAPS PTSD studies utilizing MDMA-assisted psychotherapy or testing strains of cannabis with varying CBD to THC ratios. She has worked for decades on U.S. drug policy reform based on harm reduction principles. Her 2016 book, Moody Bitches, The Truth About the Drugs You're Taking, the Sleep You're Missing, the Sex You're Not Having, and What's Really Making You Crazy, has been translated into 11 languages. Her most recent book, Good Chemistry, The Science of Connection from Soul to Psychedelics, was published in June 2020. Holland sits on the scientific and medical advisory board of several cannabis and psychedelic corporations. So if you were with us last week or 2 weeks ago on episode number 1 of the Dr. Julie Holland trifecta, you know we were talking about the science of connection and how psychedelics work to foster different growth of neural pathways, and they shake up the default mode network and that kind of thing. And this week we're going to talk about how antidepressants may interfere with how psychedelics work. And therefore a lot of people are wondering, well, can I taper off my antidepressants? And the answer is, well, first off, only with your medical advice, somebody there monitoring you medically, your medical provider. But Dr. Holland has a number of strategies to help this go more successfully and talks about some of the interactions with psychedelics that antidepressants can have and some of the effects of antidepressants and things like birth control and how they may be affecting that chemistry that we discussed in our prior episode and why that might lead someone to consider trying to taper off antidepressants. Now, just a reminder that despite the fact we are going to be talking about all kinds of medical things, the Plant Medicine Podcast is for educational and informational purposes only. Nothing here is to be construed as medical advice. And lastly, if you are a clinician and you're interested in learning more about how psychedelics interact with antidepressants and other medications and how to have those conversations with your patients, please join us over at the Psychedelic Medicine Association, where it is our mission to arm you with the information necessary to have those conversations with your patients. There are psychedelics available currently, like ketamine, and then there are many more that are on their way to FDA approval or that are available in other parts of the world. And to best serve your patients, it is imperative that we all have the most information about these therapies as possible. And they're different from normal therapies, the therapies that we're used to. They require a lot of preparation before and integration afterward and things that are different from the paradigm we're used to. And so if you would join us over at the Psychedelic Medicine Association, we are discussing all those things and ways that we can all move this area of medicine forward together. So the website to check out more information is psychedelicmedicineassociation.org. Like I said, we'd love to have you register and join us in this journey. All right. Now, just a reminder, this was part 2 of 3 and we just recorded them all at once. So there's an awkward beginning and an awkward end. But if you stick around for all 3 weeks of this, you're going to get a ton of great information from Dr. Holland. All right. Now, without further ado. And now I'd love to move into what we were talking about as the flip side of connection, which is this disconnection that's causing so many people loneliness, the loneliness pandemic that even preceded the current pandemic. And so many people have found themselves in an area where they are depressed and have had to reach out. And prior to a lot of psychedelic therapies, the only options were therapy and antidepressants. And now people want to try psychedelics, and there are some psychedelics that interact with antidepressants, so they need to taper off, or maybe for their own reasons they want to taper off and perhaps try microdosing or try something else. And so that's a question I get very frequently. And so while this is not medical advice, Dr. Holland is not giving you direct medical advice. There's disclaimers all over this show, but I would love to have that conversation about, you're a practicing psychiatrist, how you work with patients that are desiring to get off of these medicines one way or another.
Yeah. So, I've been prescribing for people since the mid 90s. And in the beginning, if somebody came to me, they were already really, really sick. Like they had been in therapy, the therapist thought they needed medicines. Like they were coming to me because they were having a lot of symptoms and they needed medicine. There was no question. And I had to explain to them about how the medicines work and that, it doesn't make you a bad person if you have to take them. But there was a lot of hand-holding and destigmatizing back in the 90s, educating people around antidepressants. But 20 years later, most of my work was really around people had been medicated for 10, 15, 20 years and wanted to be off meds. And when I wrote Moody Bitches, it was really around this issue of women being over pathologized, over medicated, that doctors were very quick to reach for their prescription pads. If you come into, it doesn't matter, it's not a psychiatrist. 80% of antidepressants in the United States of America are written by general practitioners, family docs. You go in there and you mention that you're stressed or that you're not sleeping well, or God forbid you shed a tear in front of your doctor, you're going to walk out of there with a prescription for antidepressants. That's just the way it works. And it's the quickest way to get you out of the door. And the truth is, you're going to feel better. You may still be isolated. Your life may still be very hard, but you will care less about the fact that you are isolated or your life is difficult. And so that worked, I think, for some period of time. But then too many people were on meds unnecessarily at too high of doses for too long. And everybody's just kind of getting numb, oh, I should be feeling something, but I'm not. And also, one of the things that really still worries me that I wrote about in Moody Bitches is that women who are on birth control and antidepressants, it's sort of a double whammy. Where you're very steady emotionally and hormonally, but you're not very horny. You're less likely to fall in love because of the SSRIs, and you're less likely to pursue somebody sexually because of the birth control, because birth control to some degree sort of tricks your body into thinking it's already pregnant. If your body thinks there's a bun in the oven, it's not going to run around looking for a sperm donor. But also, when you fall in love with somebody, when that the first few days or weeks where like you just figured out you're attracted to somebody and you're like think a lot about them and you're trying to figure out everything you can about them, and maybe you're not very hungry, you can't sleep because you're kind of wired, and when you think about them you blush, like there's all these physiological things that happen when you're attracted to somebody. None of those things really happen when you're on SSRIs. So the mechanisms that are supposed to happen to get you obsessed about somebody, delusional about somebody, fixated on somebody and chasing them down, those things don't happen, especially if you're on birth control and SSRIs. I had so many patients that were on this combination and they were all single. And it really started to worry me that these meds are getting in the way of them. They're miserable because they're single. Then they get on these meds that keep them single. That is not good. So that's one thing I really worry about with people over medicated. And then the other issue that is new that I worry about that kind of keeps me up at night practically is that when we looked at the people who had PTSD who were given MDMA, and we took everybody who had MDMA, not placebo, right? We looked at everybody who got MDMA and we divided them into people who had been on SSRIs before and people who hadn't. The people who were on SSRIs prior to the study did not do as well. They didn't have as big responses from the MDMA, both in terms of a physiological response, like a little increase in the blood pressure, a little increase in the heart rate. Like they didn't physically respond as much, and emotionally they didn't respond as much. And when you looked at their PTSD scores, the people who really responded from MDMA-assisted psychotherapy who had PTSD were the people who'd never been on SSRIs. The people who had a muted response, who didn't get as much better as the other group, were the ones who had been on SSRIs. So now the question is, are SSRIs interfering with your ability to respond to MDMA assisted psychotherapy. That's I don't know, I'm not going to say terrifying, but it's very, very concerning. We don't know for sure. This early study, the numbers were not good, and people are going to need to look more at this. And then the issue is going to be, is this also true for psilocybin? I have a feeling it won't be, because with MDMA, you need the reuptake inhibitor, which is exactly where the SSRIs hit. But so this other issue now is for people who do want to microdose or macrodose, or they want to take ayahuasca, but they're on psych meds. What do? And it's tricky, right? Because coming off of psych meds is no easy feat, right? You really have to do a gradual taper. There has to be somebody who's supervising you, and you've got to have other things in place, right? Anybody who's coming off of antidepressants is going to have a hard time. It's always hard to come off of it. There's like a withdrawal period where you feel worse before you feel better. And there have to be some other things in place that help you get through that. And, whether those things are like cardio, sunshine, vitamin D, probiotics, meditation, yoga, anti-inflammatory diet, psychotherapy. I think exercise is the biggest thing that really helps you get past being on meds. Or sometimes you have to actually even be on another med to get off the meds. Like, for instance, Effexor. Really hard to get off of. Hardest medicine to get off of in psychiatry, as far as I'm concerned. Cymbalta, also kind of tricky. Those two medicines, the easiest way to get off is to actually start another medicine, just a regular SSRI, do the taper, then taper the SSRI. So it's like a two-part process. So it's not easy to come off these meds, but you really have to be off these meds. First of all, if you would like to engage in an ayahuasca circle, you cannot be taking antidepressants or any kind of stimulant. And there's a long list of meds you really cannot take if you're going to take ayahuasca. So that's the most complicated. Then you have macrodosing with MDMA or psilocybin. And for MDMA, for sure, you cannot be on antidepressants. And then psilocybin, it's still sort of unclear whether you can or not. I mean, I think it's better if you can be off, but there are definitely reports of people still experiencing psilocybin while they're taking antidepressants. Lithium is a big no-no with psychedelics, for sure. And also, anybody who's got a history of bipolar disorder, if you've ever had a manic episode, psychedelics are potentially going to be very destabilizing for you, and you really need to be careful. It's crucial that you still get 8 hours of sleep out of every 24, or you could very easily have a manic episode. So, you go away for like an ayahuasca retreat and you're up for 2 nights like that, even if the ayahuasca isn't tripping you over into mania, that sleep deprivation could be. So, all the research, we should say really importantly, that all the psilocybin research, the MDMA research, they do not allow anybody with a history of psychosis at all, history of schizophrenia, history of bipolar disorder, schizoaffective. None of those people are allowed in these studies. So the safest thing to say for anybody with that kind of a psychiatric history is that these meds right now are not for you, and you got to wait a little bit and let's see, how things settle out. Now, microdosing is a little different, right? We know people can microdose on anything, basically. This is all anecdotal, but we have got a lot of anecdotal data that people are combining various things with microdosing and not seeming to have too much of a problem. So that is often a place to start. Like, I've got some patients who are microdosing to help them get off their meds so that they can macrodose, for instance. Or they're microdosing just to help them get off their meds. And we are hearing stories about people who are successfully doing it, but it's really something that you have to have somebody helping you. It's not the kind of thing you can really go alone. Getting off antidepressants requires somebody who knows what they're doing to help you.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you have to do it like a gradual taper.
And with the people that you've worked with that are using microdosing, is there one substance that they're using you've seen that's more effective than others in that transition?
No, I definitely have patients who are microdosing LSD, and I have patients who are microdosing mushrooms. And I'm always sort of amazed at what people can get their hands on. But, it's out there. I don't know. I definitely have people who are like using liquid LSD to microdose. So the biggest difference is how long it lasts, right? LSD is a very long acting compound. So um, it's a long day, even a microdose. I mean, you're not going to fall asleep as easily as the next couple of days. So I think mushrooms can be easier just because they're shorter acting. But I feel like people are getting good responses either way. I haven't heard about too many sort of nightmare scenarios. I mean, if you have, let's give cautionary tales, but I don't actually have too many cautionary tales to share when it comes to microdosing, to be honest.
That's great. How about things like ketamine lozenges? Is anything like that ever used in a taper off period?
Well, I definitely have people who are using, one of the nice things about ketamine is that it plays nicely with others, right? There's most medicines you can combine with ketamine. So if you are somebody who can't get off meds, but you want to avail yourself of some sort of altered state type assisted therapy, ketamine is a great way to go. Um, the only medicine that seems to sort of get in the way, maybe, of ketamine a little bit is like high dose Lamictal, lamotrigine, which is a mood stabilizer. Um, but so if, and then the other great thing about ketamine is it's legal, right? Right now, if somebody wants a macrodose of ketamine, they can actually go to a clinic and get it. Whereas for most of us living in the United States, um, ayahuasca, psilocybin, MDMA, not yet legal, not yet really available. So, um, and if somebody has never had any sort of an altered state, I think they can sort of practice and get used to it with ketamine before making a move to something that may actually work better. I'm not a huge fan of ketamine, but it's better than nothing, and it is good to sort of get people. I mean, my biggest complaint with ketamine is it doesn't seem to last, right? You really still need to have these boosters every 2 weeks or 4 weeks. It's not like you get treated and you're off and running. Whereas sometimes with MDMA and PTSD or with psilocybin and depression, it is the case that you have a few doses and you're off and running, and you don't need these boosters.
Yeah. Have you found it to be useful in the tapering process itself? If somebody's having a hard time tapering and maybe they go for an experience with a macrodose
Yeah,
of ketamine?
yeah, I have had some people who are in the process of getting multiple ketamine treatments have been able to taper. Yeah.
And with tapering and microdosing, this is a question I get often, because we talk about, okay, certain things aren't going to be, certain substances, psychedelics are not going to be as effective if you're on these. So they say to me, well, if I'm on those already and I want to use microdosing to get off, is it not going to work because I'm already on them? Kind of like the catch 22. And I think what you're saying is that there's, not enough interaction. Like there's somehow the microdose, even if it's placebo effect, because we found out a lot of the research is showing like microdosing, some of what's going on is placebo effect, which is fine. So it's not a concern that patients should have that, say they're on something that has been shown to make psilocybin maybe less effective. If they want to still microdose with psilocybin to get off that SSRI that may make it less effective, it's still a possibility for them to do that.
I do think that microdosing for some people makes it easier to taper off the meds. But the most important thing really is that you have a very gradual taper and you've got a lot of other supports in place, because the mood is going to dip. There's really no way around it. For most antidepressants, there really is a withdrawal phase. There's acute withdrawal, and then there's sort of a subacute that lasts longer. That's not quite as deep dive. But it's hard to get off meds. And my patients who have been the most successful at getting off meds, it's not that they've microdosed or used ketamine or whatever. It's really, for the most part, it's that they have stuck with an exercise program. And that has been the thing that gets them. And the other thing is, if you manage to like meet somebody and fall in love, that seems to work very well too. There really is a very particular physiology and pharmacology that underlies and accompanies infatuation and attachment in the early stages, and it's a pretty heady mix. It's a great proprietary blend of chemicals. If you're lucky enough to like meet someone and be excited about somebody, that's a great time to do a taper off your meds, because you've got some other physiology and pharmacology in place that will keep your mood in an okay place while you're tapering down.
I like that. So, moral of the story is find somebody you love who also is into exercise and this is going to all
Right.
go, this is all
There
going
you
to go
go.
much better. I mean, those are massively
Great idea.
right? These are very important tips because at this, people are
Yeah.
looking for anything to make that better, and maybe not the love part, but at least the exercise part is basically accessible to everybody in some form
Yeah.
or another. So,
Well, it does sort of get back to this neuroplasticity issue, right? Like one of the things I like about ketamine is that it definitely enables neuroplasticity. And so that means it's really important what you do around the sessions. Um, like, I have some patients who are having ketamine treatments, but I like to talk to them about what you're doing the day after the ketamine treatment. Um, because you are a little bit more in this plastic state, so that it becomes very important that you exercise, that you eat right, that you watch a comedy or laugh or feel good, or it's like teach your brain again how to experience joy and ease. I mean, you need to sort of take these opportunities to learn. So I've been playing with babies recently every once in a while, and like they're the natural state of a baby is like play and wonder. There's a lot of interaction. There's sort of goofy level of play and wonder, and like I just feel like if anything you can do to put yourself in that baby like place of wonder and awe and playfulness, that's where your brain needs to go again. And it's in there. You were like that when you were a baby. Like you were happy, and you can get back in touch with that happiness. But your brain learns to be sad. Your brain learns to be anxious. Your brain can learn to be at ease and learn to have joy. It really is a question of like doing it over and over again and sort of rerouting, reconfiguring, changing the circuitry. You can get into ruts, bad and good. So you really have to sort of focus yourself on getting into these good ruts over and over. And then it gets easier and easier. And things that enhance neuroplasticity, like cardio, like ketamine, like psychedelics, and like cannabinoids too. CBD and THC both enhance neuroplasticity, and oxytocin enhances neuroplasticity, right? So all of these things, hugging, kissing, orgasm, all of these things enhance neuroplasticity. That means they increase the brain's ability to learn new things and to learn new ways of being. And the more you do them, the better you get at them. And this is one reason why I'm not crazy about people going to psychoanalysis, where 4 or 5 times a week they talk about the places where they got hurt and the places where they were shortchanged and where they were let down and betrayed. And they just keep talking about it over and over, and they get better at feeling shortchanged and betrayed and hurt. And that is not the direction you need to be going in. You need to practice feeling good. And I think, this is why I always talk about how the dichotomy between therapeutic and recreational is really a false one. Because anytime you are recreating and relaxing and at ease and being playful and feeling good, that is therapeutic, So I don't differentiate so much. I do think it's that there is a safety. Like if you look at the medical model of MDMA assisted psychotherapy versus going into a club and buying a tablet, then of course the medical model is safer. But I can't tell you for sure that you are going to, be happier coming out of a therapy session with MDMA versus, having a great night at a club with all your friends where everyone's taking MDMA. I mean, I would hope that you're really doing more digging in the therapy session and that you're really unearthing trauma and you're going to be better for it. But both of those things are therapeutic,
yeah.
It's just that the medical model is safer.
Yeah. Well,
But it is only safer because of our drug policy.
Right. True. Well, that is a fantastic way to end part 2 of our conversation, because I think there's a lot of hope in the last thing you said, which is, you were born in a state of wonder and joy. You can train your brain to get back there, and you've given us some great concrete ways to start working toward that if we're struggling with getting off antidepressants. Thanks so much for listening to the Plant Medicine Podcast. If you enjoyed what you heard, please leave us an iTunes rating or review. It helps other people find the show. And if you'd like to find out more about plant medicine, including the show notes from today's episode, please head over to plantmedicine.org. The music for the Plant Medicine Podcast is by the incredible Porangi. If you'd like to check out his music, please find him at porangi.com or on social media at PORANGUI.